Hello, everyone. I am Ross Kimborowski from CrowdSPRING, and I have with me Ross Resnick from Roaming Hunger, and we're happy to be here with you today talking about branding for food trucks. So let me just tell you how it's going to go today, and then I'm going to let Ross Resnick introduce himself and Roaming Hunger. We're going to spend about 15 minutes talking over the key concepts of how you build a strong brand and brand identity for your business. And then we're going to go into an interactive part where for the next roughly 40 to 45 minutes, we're together going to look at actual food truck brands. So some of you have graciously volunteered to let us talk about your brands and help you improve them. And so we'll live deconstruct them and try to point out areas where we can do better. So Ross, why don't you introduce yourself quickly and Roaming Hunger.
Thanks, Ross. Hi, I'm Ross Resnick, and I am the founder and CEO of Roaming Hunger. Roaming Hunger started in 2009 with a really basic idea, and that was to help people discover this emerging world of food trucks. And since then, we've really focused on building a platform to help food trucks get started, get discovered, get booked into locations and into private events, and to get orders from eaters. Our mission is to connect communities through food, and couldn't be more excited to be here today to talk about what we feel is so important to doing all of that, the brand. So thank you, Ross, and to CrowdSPRING for having myself and Roaming Hunger here today.
Outstanding. All right, let's get going. I've got some slides. We're going to walk through examples and concepts, and then we'll talk for a bit and all together. So how to create a memorable food truck brand. The thing that I think most people don't understand particularly well, and this is an important concept, is that if you underinvest in good design at the very beginning, you end up spending much more money long term. A lot of business owners that have a really tough time building their brand struggle to figure out why am I having such a hard time? And this is true in food trucks as it is in every other kind of business. And Dr. Ralph Speth, who's the CEO of Jaguar and Land Rover, said it best: if you think that good design is expensive, you should look at the cost of bad design, because poor brands really suffer. One of the challenges for food truck businesses, and businesses of any kind, but particularly businesses that serve food, is people don't know who you are. They don't know your business. They don't know your menu. They don't know your reputation, but yet you're trying to sell something to them. And of course, at some point in time, when you develop a loyal client base, when people are looking to see where your food truck is going to be next and travel to those locations, that creates a booming business. But at the very beginning, or if you enter new areas, or if you have new people move into the area, you got to get to know them better. And so one of the best ways to do that is through building your own brand. What is a brand? A brand is the sum total of experiences that people have with your business. Now, a lot of business owners mistakenly think that a brand is your logo. So somebody says, do you have a brand? And you say, yeah, I have a great logo. Your logo is not your brand. Your logo is a small part of your visual identity, called brand identity. Everything visual about your business. So that includes your logo. It includes your name. It includes the uniforms that you or your staff wear. It includes your food truck and how it looks. It includes the plates on which you serve things, your website, your Instagram account, your Facebook account, all of those other things. It's what you, your staff, and others can see. Now, one of the things about brand is that people mistakenly assume that it's everything you could see right now. But people forget that a brand goes much deeper than that. If you look at an iceberg and you see the top 10% of the iceberg, you don't really know how large it is underground. And brands work the same way. Put differently, how people perceive your brand is important. And so the things that you don't think about, like the plates you use, the utensils, the receipts you give people, how you communicate with them, all of those are relevant. All of those form part of their iceberg, and all of those are important to communicate a strong brand. Now, when it comes to food businesses, drink businesses, most businesses of any kind, symbols play a powerful role. So if you think about a simple Starbucks cup, people walking across the street 50 feet from you carrying a cup with a logo that looks like Starbucks will immediately be associated with Starbucks, whether you can plainly see that logo or not. And that's because our brains fill in gaps. And so when people use symbols, they create a lot of powerful imagery, and not just imagery, but also emotional reaction. So one good example is Nike. When we see a Nike symbol, of course, we identify that with the shoe. But there's a lot more to symbolism and imagery when it comes to business. So for Nike, when people see a Nike symbol, they also think of innovation. They may think of performance, lifestyle, fashion, because a lot of people will buy Nike products simply because it's fashionable. And so there's a great connection between creating some symbolism and imagery in a food business and actual outcomes, particularly in food, because when it comes to brand identity, like a logo or a name, remember that the two things happen when people see a logo. The first is there's an actual chemical reaction in the brain in response to that logo. And the reason there's a chemical reaction is because there's some identity of that business if you've seen that logo before. Think about it. In the food business, that identity could be extremely powerful because that chemical reaction can prompt people to think, I'm hungry. This is a great brand. I want to buy something from them. And then the second thing is expectation. And the expectation is about the quality of the products or services you're going to get from that business. And so in the food business, again, if the food is delicious and great and well served, then your expectation is going to be, I'm going to have a phenomenal meal. And so I'm going to go out of my way to find this business. Food trucks don't have to have actual symbols to create the same kind of imagery, but you do need imagery. And the reason imagery is important is because people process images 60,000 times faster than they process words. So when somebody sees a food truck, just at a glance, they could see what it is if there's a nice image or a nice symbol on it way before they can read the words on it. And so this is a good example of one that takes advantage of this. Here's another example, a very unique truck. It's not bland. There's not a lot going on other than the pattern, but it's really nice and it stands out. And the last thing I'll mention about imagery and symbolism is don't forget all of the other pieces of your visual identity. So your employees don't need to wear fancy outfits, and this is a good example, but some of the things they wear should be somehow connected to the brand. And so in this case, one of the dominant colors for this food truck is orange, and you could see that the employees have orange in their uniforms. So the important thing for you as a business owner to think about and to understand is that every single thing you do in your business affects your brand. So from your logo to the ingredients you choose to use, to how you publicize your menu and write it, to the items that you sell, to how you greet your customers, to how you talk to people, to your Facebook account, all of those things are important. And one way for you to think about your position in the market is something that larger companies do, but this is actually a really good exercise for businesses of any size. And it sounds a little bit intimidating, but it's actually really easy. It's called a SWOT analysis. And SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Now, on the first slide of this deck, and we'll make this available to all of you, and on the last slide of this deck, we have 3 links to great articles on the crowdSPRING blog that talk about the food truck business and how to build a strong brand identity. In the second and third articles, we go through all of the detailed questions you should be asking in a SWOT analysis, because that helps you understand how do you improve your food truck business in your local market? How do you gain more customers? How do you beat the competition and get people to want to buy your products because they love them, not simply because they're hungry? Let's talk about in general, this is where we're going to lay the foundation for the conversation that's going to take place in a few minutes. Your brand element. So again, your brand is every touch point with the customer, but we're talking about visual design here. And so rather than talk about specifics, I want to talk about generalities. They need to be memorable. And the reason they need to be memorable is because if somebody sees your food truck on a Monday, you want them to recognize that it's your food truck on a Wednesday. Because if they had a great experience, they have to be able to identify it. And if your truck looks like dozens of other trucks that live in the area and sell in the area, they're not going to be able to tell the difference. One good example of that, you can easily look at any single market, but here's an example from the medical market where medical businesses will take an icon, slap a name on it, and call them a medical business. But think about it from the perspective of a customer. When they look at all of these logos, they look alike. There's no way to tell these businesses apart. And this often happens in the food truck business, especially if you don't take the time to create a wrap and a brand for your business. Second, it has to be meaningful. If it's not meaningful, if it's forgettable, if it's bland, doesn't have a good catchy name, doesn't have a particularly interesting visual identity, and doesn't connect with the people, then it's going to be forgetful. And so it's important that it connects with them in some way. It has to be likable, and this is really important. So part of the issue with likability is the colors you use, the name of your business, the way you create your menu, the items that you put on the menu, and the things that you sell should all connect with your audience. So if you are selling primarily to women, then it's probably not a great idea to use a lot of color black in your truck. On the other hand, if you're selling to men primarily because of the kind of food you're making, you shouldn't be using a lot of pink. But if you have a varied audience, if you have an eclectic audience, if you have a Gen Z or a millennial audience, younger, 18 to 25-year-olds, then you want to be using brighter colors. You want to be using bigger and more interesting fonts because you want to connect your business with the audience. It has to be transferable because remember that you're going to need to, for example, print your logo on a small business card or on a menu. You also may need to have it in really, really large size on your food truck. And if you later on become more successful and expand the number of trucks and create restaurants, you may have outdoor signage with a huge logo on the outdoor sign. So if your logo can't be transferred from a really tiny example to a big example, then you're compromising your brand. It has to be adaptable. Adaptability is about maintaining a visual image consistently over a period of time. So if you think about the Nike logo, it hasn't changed much in many decades. The Apple logo hasn't changed much in many decades. If a company is forced to constantly change its visual identity, first of all, it's expensive. Second of all, it confuses your public because imagine if your food truck was purple one day and then white the next day. People wouldn't know it's the same business. And it works the same with visual identity. So make sure that you create something that isn't a fad, but can maintain over time. And it has to be protectable. And it doesn't mean that you have to be able to trademark your logo. What it means is you should have something unique. If you go online to a business name generator and get a random business name, and then go online to a logo generator and get a random logo, it will look like thousands of other businesses, hundreds of other food trucks, nothing distinguishable about them, and you'll struggle building a thriving business. And let's work through some examples. And this is a chance for you to actually pitch in and start the conversation going here, and then we're going to continue in the live sites. So when I show you these examples, please use chat and provide some feedback. Could be really quick statements. So what I'm looking for is which one you think is better and why. The why is very important because it connects with the elements we just talked about. So here are two logos. On the left is Bog Street, and on the right is Melia Store. So I'd love some of your input. Which do you think is more unique and more interesting? Just at a first glance, because people only spend a couple of seconds looking at logos. And I'll give you, as you're thinking and typing, I'll give you a few details. So Deborah says Bog Street. And I want to know why, Deborah. Let's get into the why. Amber says Bog Street is more creative and catches your attention. Good, but why? What is it in that level of detail? CJ says Bog Street could not see the details in Melia. And part of CJ's right. There's really no detail in Melia. It's a hanger for a store. You could have thousands of stores that use a hanger image for that store. Deborah points out it's interesting image because there's a frog in it, and that's a great observation. Now, here's the thing about the frog. Bog Street sells musical instruments. What else do you see in that image? It's not just a frog. If you look very carefully at it, you'll see it in the negative space, that space inside the frog, a guitar. So it's an electric guitar inside the image of a frog. Very, very cute way of doing it, but also very memorable because I can assure you that you're not going to forget an image of a frog with a guitar in the negative space. It is memorable, it's unique, and even if you don't remember the name Bog Street, you're going to remember the other part. It'll be easier to find. Okay, next example. Which of these is more versatile? And remember, versatility is about being able to use it in a small example, like an avatar in social media, in a large format, like in a big billboard, or to take apart the two pieces of the logo. So the image part of the logo is called the mark. It's a small image that represents the company. And then the words of the logo are called a logo type. And so really effective logos that have both can separate the two, so you can use them independently. Deborah says Beehive is more versatile because the image and words are separate. That's a really good observation. It lets you use those items individually. So for example, imagine the Beehive on a t-shirt by itself that connects to the business. You don't necessarily need to put the words Beehive Beauty on that t-shirt to connect it to the business, or a hat, or anything else that you might want to do. CJ says the one on the left wouldn't work shrunk down, and that's exactly right. Imagine that small logo in a tiny avatar in a social network. You couldn't read any of it, and there's no way to take it apart. The other thing about versatility and is that the Beehive logo just has a single color for that image, whereas the other one has many different colors. And so if you have to reproduce it, many colors are more expensive, they're more difficult, you're more likely to go wrong, and you can't match them with as many colors because you have a lot of conflicts in that combination. And Evelyn points that out. Colors are harder to reprint. On the left one. Okay, let's look at another example. Which of these is more unique? So on the left, you have Space Monkey Partners, and on the right, you have Grounded Coffee Shop. So we're looking for something that stands out that you probably have never seen before. Which do you feel does that, and why? Ultimately, you could see both of them use the color black as a dominant color, but one of them does something a little different. It's not just the color black, there's more to it. So I'll start with the coffee shop while you guys are thinking and typing. One of the challenges of getting generic elements and generic logos, you put a nice coffee mug on a logo. It doesn't look bad. I mean, visually, it's nice, it's simple, but the challenge is, if you don't remember what the name of the coffee shop is, and somebody says, well, what do you remember about it? You're going to say, I remember it had a coffee mug. So imagine how many coffee shops have a coffee mug as an image on their logo. You're never going to be able to find this business. Amber says Space Monkey Partners grabbed her attention. Sarah says Space Monkey stands out. Now, why? Let me give you one of the whys. One of the whys is space is in yellow. Yellow has a really nice contrast with black. And so immediately when you look at this image, when you look at this slide, space draws more of your visual attention automatically, simply because it's different. And so if you want to point out a difference, use a color, distinguish it in some way from something else. David says Space Monkey lettering is better. And in some respects, you could see that it's closer together. It's a little bit more inviting as opposed to Grounded Coffee Shop. The grounded part is kind of spread out and a little tougher to read. And that's a really good example. The other thing with the Space Monkey, as Bill points out, it creates a puzzle for the brain to solve. It's a great observation and a great way to put it. People love brain puzzles. Think back to that Bog Street example at the beginning, the one with the frog and the negative space guitar. Brains love these kinds of puzzles. And so when you look closely, you see a monkey in a space helmet. How many businesses have you seen before that have a monkey in a space helmet? You may not remember the name Space Monkey Partners, but you're going to remember the monkey in a space helmet, which makes that business so much easier to find. And that's one of the big challenges, is how do people remember you and tell others about you? Okay, let's look at one more. Which logo uses color better? And for food businesses, color is really important because it connects with likability. So on the left, you have Serene Clinic, which uses this yellowish, orangish color. And on the right, you have the Guy Next Door Window Cleaning, which has 2 shades of blue. And Sarah says blue, but I want to hear why. Why is blue a better color in this example? So it has contrast, Sarah adds, and that's a good addition. Contrast is helpful because it lets you read the things that are most important. So the name of the business here is Guy Next Door. What that business does is window cleaning, but the important thing is the name of the business, because there could be lots of other window cleaning businesses. And so the contrast here creates a situation where it's really easy for somebody to see the name and distinguish it from what they do. Using 2 different colors helps that. Bill says guy next door, blue implies clean, and that's a great observation. When we look out a window, what we're looking for is a blue sky. We're looking for sunshine. We love to see clean windows because we can see the sky. And so when you use those kinds of colors, they connect with the audience and the expectations of the audience. And Amber says it symbolizes happiness and serenity, and that's exactly right. The one on the yellow, on the left, the orange is yellow, is kind of awkward because we don't really know how to feel about it. It feels weird because they really haven't made a choice. The contract isn't especially good because that yellow on white doesn't look particularly great, and it's pretty forgettable. Okay, last one. Which logo is clean, simple, and easy to understand? So this kind of wraps up all of those elements. What are you going to remember? What's unique? What's simple enough to communicate? You have on the left stamped patio solutions. You have on the right sugar high records. So how do we feel about these two? And think about small size, large size. Think about, what are people going to remember about this if they don't remember the name? Are they going to remember the name? So Sarah says sugar high. I want to push you, Sarah. Why? David says sugar high records keep it simple, and that's true. It's very simple words. It's a very simple image. Sarah says sugar high records it's catchy, and that's true. Why is it catchy? So one thing you see about the one on the left is you have a lot of words in it. Now we can barely make out most of the words right now. Imagine if it's tiny, 20 times smaller as a social avatar. You may be able to see the word stamped, although probably not. You will not be able to see anything else about it. It's just too busy, as Deborah says, and that's correct. Even the visual elements in it seem weird because you don't really know what's going on. So if somebody says, well, if you don't remember the name, can you tell me what was going on there? You're going to struggle to figure out all of those visual elements. On the other hand, as David says, the donut is memorable because it looks like a record and a donut with a bite taken out of it. And so if nothing else, if you can't remember the name, you're going to say, you know what? It had a donut or a record with a bite taken out of it. And it's much easier to find a unique brand and remember them when you have something unique like that. And Amber says sugar high is easy on the eyes, and that's a fair statement. We can look at that, and it's pretty flexible and easy. We don't struggle. The other one, we have to do a lot of work to figure out what's going on. Great feedback from all of you. Okay, two last points before we go to live session. So the one thing that you ought to do when you develop your visual assets is create what's called a brand guide. Now, this isn't complicated, and it doesn't have to be complicated. We talk about it in the brand identity guide and in the guide to food truck branding on our blog, and you'll have the links on the first and last slides of this presentation. A brand guide is simply a guide. It could be 1 or 2 pages that says, here is our logo. Here are the 2 variations we want used. Here are the fonts that we use on our site. Here are the sizes we like to use. Here are our brand colors in both RGB, which is what you would use for online websites, and CMYK, which is what you would use if you were to print t-shirts or print materials or menus, because those colors slightly differ. That way, if you have an employee take something to a printer to print more menus, they would know exactly the colors that your business uses and wouldn't have to guess, because your identity needs to be consistent and it's important to document it. And then finally, I want to answer a question of when is the right time to rebrand, because some of you are running a business and you're struggling to grow it, and you look at your identity and say, you know what, I can do better. And the answer to that question is, any time is the right time to rebrand if you feel like your brand is disconnected from your audience. So if you feel like you can do better with a better name, with a better visual design, a better truck wrap, better uniforms, menu design, start from somewhere. You don't have to rebrand all at once. You could start by changing the name of the business, looking to either improve or change the way you present your trucks, looking at your menu and how you present it. And it's about visual, it's about the words that you use and how you communicate. But rebranding is more than that. It's about how you communicate. It's about how you greet your customers, your Facebook presence, Instagram, everywhere else you are. Okay, so again, last slide has my contact information and the 3 blog items that I mentioned. All right, we're gonna go into the more interactive portion of the presentation. So let me share my screen here. So give me a moment to do that. So hopefully you are all seeing, and Ross Resnick is back to join us because we're going to be walking through this with you. Hopefully you're all seeing these designs. We're actually going to start with Sissy's Taco Bar. So this is a website for Sissy's Taco Bar. And again, what we're looking for is your feedback. So continue to participate the exact same way that you've been participating in the feedback. I'm going to scroll through each of these pages. We'll go through a bunch of these examples. This is it. So there's no scrolling. This is the homepage for Sissy's Taco Bar. We're looking at the logo. We're looking at the menu. We're looking at the way that the business presents itself to us and whether there are missing elements, the colors, how likable it is. Can we tell who the intended audience is? So who's eager to provide some feedback here? Ross, you want to start us off with an observation or two about this?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Ross. So I think the first question I have is, who's Sissy, and what's her story? Why are Sissy's Tacos going to be the best tacos? And what is my reason for taking one of the three, looks like three actions are, viewing the menu, ordering online, or catering. And I think that, I'm looking for a little bit more of the story. And if the food is part of that story and the presentation of the food, we're seeing that covered up right away with this more prominent pop-up. So so to me, I want to know more. I want to know more about Sissy, and hopefully visually I can learn more before I take one of those three actions.
Yeah, that's a good observation. We had a couple of piece of feedback. So Katie says you could make the web page larger. So first of all, this is something for all of you. If you want to see a bigger version of this on your own screen, slide up the black bar between the video window and the web page, and that will make the page larger for you to see, because it's not showing obviously in foot size for everybody. Tara says the food styling is great. The logo shouldn't be covering, and that's a good example. Deborah says the same thing. The actual name is covering the food, and so the food images look actually pretty appetizing when you see the small portions of them. But you have two things going on. You have a menu at the top that has all of the same items as the menu on the hero. So this area that the image covers is called a hero. It's the main image on the page. When you visit it on your laptop, on your monitor, that's what shows first. That's why it's called a hero. And so if you're covering your image of food, and in a food business, images of food are incredibly important. If you cover it with other content, which isn't adding a lot of value, you're creating friction, because again, remember, images 60,000 times more powerful than words. And in this case, people are struggling to figure out what exactly is the image. So Amber says the colors did not catch my attention. And Amber, is it which specific colors? Because there's a whole bunch of colors in here, and of course, in a Mexican business, in a business that sells tacos, color is pretty important. And colors in that kind of a business, if you go to a restaurant, for example, can be pretty lively and such. But for me, for example, and Ross, I don't know how you feel about it. For me, the purple is a little rough here, because I think purple has a challenging connection to food. There are no foods that are naturally purple. And for those of you that remember, some while back, Heinz decided to change the color of ketchup to see if they could increase sales, and changed it from red to purple. And it was a complete disaster. And part of the reason is we just don't eat purple things. If you think about, what food do you eat other than artificial foods that are purple? How do you feel about that, Ross?
Yeah, and I see what the purpose of the dark colors and kind of going for this maybe a modern, elevated experience, but also the contrast of, I can't see, is the background purple? I'm having trouble seeing.
I think the background is dark purple too. So it's
okay. It's purple on purple. So yes, I would say that there's probably more opportunity to tell the story of the vibrancy. It looks like there's great ingredients here. Corn inside of this taco, slaw. It looks like a lot of fresh ingredients, maybe those limes. And then, I don't think any of that personality is coming through in the colorway. And no, purple, I don't think represents the cuisine here.
Yeah. So I mean, Amber says that the dark color lessens the vibe of the taco bar, and that's a good observation. I mean, ultimately, listen, Color is a personal choice, and you have to make some decisions about what works well. And it may be that this particular combination of colors resonates really well with the audience. We don't know the audience, but we're trying to figure out what could work better. So for example, if this wants to have a Southwest feel to it, Deborah says these colors don't have that feel. So part of it does. You have the lime that has some of those colors. There are parts of this that definitely do, and then parts of it don't. And so what happens when you have a disconnect, a visual disconnect, our brains, we're not thinking about it. It's not like we get to this page and we have this conversation internally. Gee, you have an eggplant dark background, and then you have a purple, and then you've got this other stuff. Our brains don't do that. But while we are reading what's on the page, our brains make other connections. And so when we see food that we can't fully see, and then we see colors that don't immediately connect to the style of food that's on there, we're not exactly at home. We're not very comfortable in that particular space. And that's a good example. And so Deborah points out also, purple reminds me of royalty, so I would expect to overpay for these tacos. It's a good observation. I mean, ultimately, that may or may not be true. But purple does have this connection with expensive things and things that are not immediately natural. Let's look at one kind of example of a business that executes that same style differently. How do we feel about this execution? So different business, still selling tacos, different presentation.
Yeah, I mean, right away, Ross, we're seeing this feels fun. And there's something about the vibrancy, being able to see the food right away gets me maybe asking some questions. What's in that bowl? How would I get that bowl? Whether that's catering or through order ahead. And then the color of the logo and the contrast with the header is kind of telling me to, especially for catering, this is going to be a fun addition to my event.
Yeah.
And I think it goes really well with the theme of the cuisine as well.
And remember, Sissy's Taco Bar. Remember, one of the comments, one of the observations was, "Who is Sissy?" We want to know who Sissy is, because people like to connect with people, and so there are lots of good elements in this site and lots of opportunities for improve. People want to connect with people, and so part of the way that this business answers that question is a little bit about us. There's a small paragraph that talks about who they are and where they learn how to cook, and then you can read the full story, and you can easily find that without having to look. And that's important, because people who love restaurants generally connect with the people that are in those restaurants. They're the chefs, they're the servers, they're the themes in the restaurants. And so it's important to communicate all that. And in this example, one of the things you see, as Amber points out, is, we see the image and the colors work well together. They're all connected across the site in a way that the name, for example, if you look at the site, I'll scroll a little bit just so you kind of see the full site. Because you've got their menu, which is really nice. The name has an element that's picked up in the footer here. It doesn't appear anywhere else, but you got those brand colors connecting from the top to the bottom, which is a nice way to do it, because what's being used as the main color for calls to action is this bluish color at the top, and you can see it throughout. And one of the other things that you see is that the calls to action throughout the site are connected with an opportunity to tell a story. So the most important thing for this business right now is obviously catering, because that's what they're trying to promote. And that's what you need to think about. What's the most important action we want people to take? So if we go back to Sissy's Taco Bar, the most important action, simply because it's visually so dominant, seems to be to give some information and to get a text, joining the community. Question is a person, when they visit the website, going to immediately do that? That's something you have to think about, because if they're not, don't use that as the most important action. Think about something else. Okay, let's look at the next one.
And Ross, I just want to add one more thing. I think is even even further with a food truck is as a food truck, we there are a lot of times this ability to link the personality of the owner directly to the customer experience exists in more of a direct fashion than in a restaurant, where there are layers of servers or staff a lot of times between the owner, operator, and the eater. a food truck, really the vibrancy and the strength of the personality, and talk about memorability, getting to meet somebody and remembering them, really exists in a food truck more than anywhere else, where the ability to establish that direct connection with the person responsible for your meal is right there in front of you. So the more that you can take that deep dive and bring out yourself into this experience, eaters love that, and they really are going to remember it more than anything else.
Yep. Yeah, very, very smart observation. All right, let's take a look at the next one, next example. So again, we want to evaluate the whole thing: the logo, the navigation, the website, the atmosphere in your connection with this brand. Because one of the things that we can't see from the website is, how does this theme, how does this feeling that you experience right now as you're looking at this, how does that communicate and convey when you actually see the food truck? And is it consistent? So let me scroll through a few things, and then you can give us some feedback. The menus are not clickable here, just so you know, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Okay, so Sarah says this is better executed, and Sarah, let's talk about why. What is it about this that's better executed? So one of the things that, and maybe I'll start the conversation, Ross, and let's have you weigh in a little bit, is you've got kind of a personality to this page. You have this fire that's starting, and immediately you're wondering, what's that about? It's so unusual because that's the main element, but it also does another thing that's nice. It draws your attention to the center, which is the name of the business. And the name of the business has two elements we talked about, a name and an image that could be used independently. Ross, what do you think about this page so far?
Yeah, I think the mystique here is intentional and well done, right? So if we're being drawn right away to this idea of, well, what is Genki, right? What is it? Then I have to scroll. And I think that the intention here was to draw us in with the flames, get us scrolling down. And it looks like the point of discovery here is, maybe I read about this food truck somewhere, or I heard about it from someone, or I saw it on Instagram, and that's what led me to the page. And I think that's also an important consideration. How are people even getting to your website, right? Is it because they read an article about you? Did you do a big PR push? And people are coming in that way? Are you hoping for more organic discovery? So I think that this one, it looks like they've gotten some press coverage. I'm here because I'm curious. And then I start scrolling down. And what I really love about it is, after I've agreed that I'm going to learn more, then they say, here's where it began, page 1. And I start getting right into it. I start getting answers right away, which I think is also very important. I might have put might throw some call to actions in throughout this, to make sure that we're getting people to the right places, whether that's booking catering or placing a pickup or delivery order. But I think they've done a good job of turning it into a narrative that starts with a big question.
Yes. Now, Tara points out she would not have guessed that this was a taco page from the front. And that's a good observation. I mean, ultimately, you have to remember that it has to connect with the audience. There has to be some predictability. But one cool way that they do this, too, is in the logo. As Sarah points out, there's a question: what's Genki, my ninja? And ultimately, none of us probably knew what it was, but there's a fun play here that does push us to scroll down, and that's the question that's immediately being answered in this first section. The menus are really nice. So when you look at visual design here, you could see that there's that fun kind of side to the business that's reflected in the menus. One missed opportunity in this menu here, it's hard to read. You can't see them in bigger size. And so it would have been better, rather than putting this side by side, to put each menu in its own container and put one under the other, so they're more readable, or easily offer a PDF version for them if you can click, and these are not clickable. That's what I wanted to show you. Okay. Anything else, Ross? Any other observations about some of what's going on below here?
Yeah, I think there's a missed opportunity here. They call us ninjas in the logo, but maybe there's a way to weave that throughout where we're still ninjas on this journey with them. So maybe instead of just coupons, it's like, ninja first time courses, right? Or ninja first time training, and taking that as part of the narrative and taking us on the journey with them throughout. I think that's a missed opportunity that that is missing. And also I think there's this really killer flame motif at the top that we're all like, whoa, what is that? And then it's totally gone throughout. And then we're kind of in a more, black and white traditional space. So I might think about bringing in that flame in some other areas here, and weaving that narrative in around us being ninjas alongside them as well.
Okay. All right. Let's look at the next one. This is Athletic Meals, and their presence is on Instagram. So this is their Instagram account. So let's talk, and I wanted to weave a couple of different examples. We're going to look at Facebook next too, so that you could see, because it's not just your website. You can have a brand presence anywhere. And so let's talk about ways we can improve that brand presence. I'll start while you're all looking at this and thinking through it. There's not much more to that page. This is it. But one thing, when you are on a visual social network like Instagram and you are sharing images, be sure that you are tagging these images with your logo. So if you look at the first example, you see the Athletic Meals logo, you see it in the second example, you see it in the center one at the bottom, but none of the other images have the logo. So if that image is copied or shared or put on somebody's, it moved to Twitter or anywhere else, nobody will know to associate it with your brand. Nobody will know what your brand is or to look you up. So if you're creating images, take the extra few seconds and put your logo on that brand, number one. Number two, make sure that you're putting it consistently in the same space. In other words, you've got 3 different examples here, and there's a fourth one where just the initials are used in the did you know one. Put it consistently in the same space so you can easily identify it. Right now, they're kind of all over the place. Some are big, some are small, some are on the left, on the right, in the center. It's awkward to have to look for them everywhere. It doesn't have to be very prominent, but it should be present. Jason says the AM logo looks very stock. Reminds me of the Melia store hanger logo in the presentation. Could belong to many different companies, and that's a good example. I mean, it's a fork for a meal store, and then an A, which is not truly very readable as an A. I mean, our brains help us do that, and an M, but they're different fonts, different styles, different colors. So there's a lot going on visually, and while one could say it's simple, it's actually a bit complex. Ross, how do you feel about the description of the business in that section? Instagram doesn't give you a lot of space, but obviously you use the space for what you get.
Yeah, and I think that Ross is even more the reason that when it comes to Instagram or anywhere where there's limited space, we want to be really specific in what actions we want the user to take. So it looks like this is catering services, and they're fit for an athlete. So what if I'm an athlete and I'm interested in catering services? What do I do? Where do I go? How would I go about that? And I don't see that prevalent in the imagery of that idea of catering services fit for an athlete, and nor do I see a very clear and concise call to action for me as the athlete to take the next steps to get this for catering. So from a description standpoint, simpler is definitely better. We want to see describing the essence of what I need to know to take the action, and then a way for me to easily just take the action.
Yep, which is great observation. Yeah, great observation. And Jason points out something I'm struggling with too here. Where are the athletes in the images? It would be great to see athletes eating this food, because ultimately this is supposed to be athletic meals, and it seems like there's an opportunity here to show athletes, runners, weightlifters, and others eating this food. It may mean ask your audience, hey, I'll give you 50% off or a free meal if you can take this meal and take a photo in the gym or while you're exercising, because it gives you this great story to tell. And at the end of the day, visual design and brand building is about storytelling. You need to create stories about your business so that other people can talk about them. So that's something to keep in mind. Okay, let's look at another one. So this is Facebook, Bay Burger Food Truck. And it looks like this is their home. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with having a home on a social network if that's what you can do right now. It's always better to have a presence on your own site. but budgets, time, other things make that really difficult. Sometimes you don't have the know-how, and that's where you may approach somebody like Roaming Hunger for help with that. But at the end of the day, visual design is very important. So even if you don't have the ability to create your own website, even if you can't get a logo from a company like crowdSPRING, you still need to create that comfortable atmosphere on the social network. So Bay Burger Food Truck, Facebook, they've got this is the page. It's a standard Facebook template, so you only can modify a few things on this template. I'll start the conversation. One immediate thing we notice at the top is if there's a photo of something. I think it's a hand holding what I assume is a burger based on the name and seeing a little slice of it, but it's out of focus and I'm not seeing exactly what it is. And because it's out of focus and the colors look a little awkward, it's not especially appetizing to me. Katie points out that the logo should be included in the banner at the top. It's hard to see the logo in the small avatar, and she's absolutely right. This is an example of where a logo isn't nearly as adaptable as you want it to be. And so where you run into that situation, but you still want people to recognize your business, put it in the main image. Ross, what do you think about this page? Let me click through a couple more. So this is the menu section, and you can click into the menu and you can see it. And you've got a few things with the way the menu shows.
Look at that delicious burger right there at the top. I would have loved to see that right there, front and center, because that's getting me hungry. It's still breakfast time here, but I see that burger and I'm getting hungry. So I think they just the use of it and how it's put together on the homepage, it doesn't help me as the eater understand how do I interact with this food truck. One thing that I do like that they did that we actually didn't see in a lot of other examples is they very clearly said, we are a food truck, and they put it in their name. We're a food truck. So I understand a little bit more about what to expect up front in terms of how do I interact with this food establishment. But this doesn't tell me there's a WhatsApp call to action. It doesn't tell me how do I find this food truck? How do I order from this food truck? How do I book this food truck for catering? Or how do I get this food truck to come out to my event? And those are really the questions that have to be answered right away as the eater. And if we can put ourselves in that in the most empathetic position possible of the eater, and based on what you as the business owner, as the food truck owner, believe is most important in your mix, then we can prioritize and say, okay, great. Here's what we got to put up front. Here's the imagery. Here's the language. Come on, look at that. It's delicious.
Yeah.
Right?
So
for catering, come on. Okay, let's go. Let's have a party.
Yeah, and that goes to what we were talking about earlier. I mean, imagine this as the main hero image. All of us are looking at this, and saying, if we like burgers, this looks absolutely amazing. We want to eat it. That's a very different emotional reaction with what we're seeing than what we saw initially when we saw just the homepage of the business. Okay, let's take a look at another one. Mobile street food trailer. So one thing you could see right away, and I'll start the conversation, is we were talking about burgers and how to showcase what you are actually selling. And here's a good example of a burger that does exactly that in a way that feels appetizing. Now, Ross, you want to start us off with some feedback on this as people are thinking and typing?
Yeah. I think that as a food truck owner, it's really an interesting design challenge to think about when somebody is looking to purchase your services, whether that's to place an order, to book you for catering or an event, what do they need to see? And so for me, when I see this, I'm wondering, Dirty Diner, how cool, what is that? And I'm missing the visual imagery or the picture of the physical truck itself, or the trailer, I think in this case. So how do we bring in that imagery to help people understand and picture what could this Dirty Diner look like if I'm going to go have lunch from there? I can see with the food, if I'm going to order pickup or delivery, what my burger is going to look like. But if I want to get this for a birthday party or for an event, how can I imagine that event with this Dirty Diner there alongside the rest of my event?
Yeah. How do we feel about, so we've got another example of purple here on a burger. So in the first instance, we saw it in a Southwest type, theme restaurant. Now we've got it on a diner. How do we feel about the purple here? So for me, it's still a struggle. I still have a really tough time with purple in a food setting, because other than a connection to something, royal or something expensive, I always struggle when I think about the colors. What was the last thing I ate that was purple? And the answer for me is nothing. I've never eaten anything that was purple unless it was, a candy or something, and it was candy coloring. Food, burgers aren't purple. Food isn't generally purple. Nothing the diner sells connects with that. And so there's a question of, is there a strong connection between that particular color with a possible audience? And Deborah points out, and I think fairly, that the color may be clashing with the image. So the image feels out of place in that particular combination, where it might feel more comfort with a different one. One thing that you may notice or not, contrast is very important when you're telling your story. So the first button on the navigation menu is home, but you could see that it's in red. So the page that you're on is actually in red. And so when we go to menu is in red, but you could see that the contrast is very poor. It's tough to read the word menu there. And so it'd be far better if you used a color like white here to distinguish the page that you're on, as opposed to red, because while red does connect with maybe some of the colors used in the logo, red and purple don't work very well together, and certainly don't work well together one on top of the other. What about the menu? Ross, what do you think about the way the menus are presented?
I love the food pictures, and I think that's so important, whether you're online or on site. People especially with food trucks, they love to see the food. And so a lot of us have been trained through the ordering apps to now expect a picture alongside the item that we're ordering. And I would argue that has been a convention for food trucks on site, putting pictures of the food up on the on menus, or oftentimes on websites for a longer time than that. But I do think that food photography is critical. The resolution isn't great, so it's a little bit of a blur, but it does look like there's details in there, and I see kind of this like collage of sauces that are bringing out a lot of great colors and vibrancy. And I'm seeing kind of the essence of what I'm getting into by dining here is it's going to be dirty. It's going to be a dirty mess. And that's what I'm signing up for. That's what I'm going out for. I'm not putting on the button-down shirt to go dine at Ringo's Dirty Diner. I'm putting on a shirt that I can get dirty, and I'm going to roll up my sleeves and enjoy myself probably on a weekend to eat this delicious-looking food.
So Linda, probably channeling my mom, reminds me that eggplant and purple cabbage are both purple. And I guess I now understand why I don't connect purple to food businesses, because eggplant is one of those foods that I simply don't like. But they are purple. So there are a couple of foods that are purple. The question at the end of the day is, is it a common color to associate, and does it flow well with the brand that you're trying to create? And that's really the question that you need to ask yourself. Not about me eating more vegetables, but about connecting your business to your customers. Okay, so let's just take a quick look here at the gallery. Presumably, we're going to see images of food and such. So one thing, and I'll start us off, I'm hopeful that you can weigh in, and I think we've opened up microphones for almost all of you. So let's experiment for the last 5 minutes with verbal comments. So you should feel free to speak if you want to chime in as opposed to type. This first image is hard to read. We have no idea what it is. So when you add an image to a page, check to make sure that the image is actually added and shows correctly. In this case, these are probably big images, and it's zooming in on a part of them. So some of these are okay, but for example, the second, third, fourth image may all be of the same thing. It's hard to see what it actually is because of the way that it zooms. And we can go deeper into the image, and maybe it is exactly what it's supposed to be. But try to include some variety in some of these images so that people can get a sense for what kind of food you have. For those of you on mobile phones, the microphones won't open, but if you're on a computer, you could either type or just use your microphone. Ross, what do you think about these images?
Yeah, I think order matters, right? So thinking again about what do I need to learn or understand about Ringo's Dirty Diner in order to make a purchasing decision. If these are, if this is just an image gallery that kind of collected from the front page and you don't have a ton of control about it over it, sometimes that's true with, when we're using website templates. I would still take a look and make sure that we're kind of combining the right elements in the right places. At the bottom left, I'm seeing maybe the first picture here of the diner itself. And I might suggest to make that, you can make it either the first image or even split it across the first 2 images. You can get creative on how you do that by cutting images and placing them in different tiles if you are limited to a template. And the logo, I don't believe should appear in an images section. The logo should probably be woven and integrated throughout the website and not so much buried as the last image of an image section.
Yeah, and if that's the logo, we're not seeing it on the home page here. We're not introduced to that concept until we see it on the images section. So maybe that's a concept, maybe that's an old logo, we don't really know, but ultimately good observations. All right, let's tackle one more. We got 3 minutes together. Let's see if we can do, and if you have questions, feel free to ask questions too. So Moto. So how do we feel about this one? Let me just scroll through it. So it looks like, just based on book catering in Orlando or Tampa, this is based in Florida. Also taco. At least one of these. No, it looks like all of them are tacos. So how do we feel about this presentation? Ross, you want to start us off?
Yeah, definitely. I think I want to understand, more about what Moto means right away. And I think that doesn't come across immediately. With Moto, we have to go down to the motto, which is cute. I like that on how that is. It looks like there's kind of a tattoo motif throughout. And with the food truck, how that looks, the Moto, kind of the typeface of that logo and how it's designed. And I might just suggest to bring that out more if we're going to kind of go with, the sort of like the tatted, this is the biker stop type of idea, or just kind of that being the theme. How far can we take that? How do we really elevate that? So I understand right away what's going on. I mean, I'm seeing that, it's tacos with parathas. I mean, sounds delicious. But how do I really get that right away and understand more of that as soon as possible in the logo itself and in the visual imagery that I'm presented with?
Yeah. One thing I'll add, because this is relevant to all of you when you're trying to communicate on a website like this, the text below "We are Moto," which starts from Tampa to Orlando. There's a lot of content. There's a lot of copy, and it may not seem like a lot, but when you force people to read a substantial amount of copy, they'll usually pass. So one thing you should do when you look at your own sites is take a hard look at how you're explaining your business. Because, for example, from Tampa to Orlando here, you already have these buttons that communicate that. So it's probably not that critically important. Spreading the good word about a better type of taco may be important, maybe not. Maybe what you need to focus on is this part at the end, because that's the part that's going to cause us to salivate, to think, gee, I want to try that taco. And with fewer words, you're pushing people to focus on fewer things, which is important because you're emphasizing those things more importantly. If you have a lot of things going on, it's hard for people to figure out what's important. When you shorten the copy and have fewer things, you're telling them, hey, this is what's most important and the thing that you should connect with the best. We got a minute or two together. Are there any questions that we can answer for you? Feel free to talk. Just unmute yourself, and if you're muted, and ask a question or type a question. We will make the slides available for all of you, for everybody that registered as PDFs, so you can have those examples plus the links. If you have a question after the webinar, who can you contact via email? So we'll shoot an email to everybody with our contact information for both crowdSPRING and for Roaming Hunger. So you'll have that information. Any other questions? I believe we'll make the video available afterwards, so you can watch it again if you want to, or if you want to share it with a friend who's in the business, and we'll connect the slides to that as well. So we do that after all our webinars. We appreciate those of you that that shared your sites. You know, we wanted to keep it constructive because the goal here is for all of us to improve it. I know that, you know, Ross and I know you're struggling with your businesses. This is a very challenging time to run a food business because you're subject to a lot of different effects, the economy and the pandemic and such. So stay with it. We know these food businesses are great. I love food trucks. I know Ross does too. Some of the best food I've ever had comes from them. And so it's exciting that you are investing in that business and trying to grow it. And we wish you all the best of luck.
Thank you, everyone.